usually these talks after class kind of arise spontaneously, but every so often, and this is happening recently, something is fed to me earlier, like early in the week, and it's still present when I'm finished with the class. So I'm going to talk about this thing because it seems to want to be talked about. It's really simple. It's basically the idea of self-soothing. I don't know why it's so prominent right now, but I'm very reminded of the experience of being a baby in the crib, and of crying. And crying as hard as I could to get attention. Primarily the attention of my mother, but I would have taken anybody who would have walked in the room at that point. But I remember crying really hard for any number of reasons. But the thing I most remember was nobody coming and trying to deal with that. And usually it would build and build because I was unable to accept the idea that somebody wouldn't show up. And so I would go through this dramatic build of crying. It would get louder and more hysterical. And actually it would often arrive at a kind of place of what I would call panic, although I was too young to know that. Like, nobody's ever coming. And you're on your own in this crib, behind bars, probably soaking wet, and really uncomfortable and really afraid. And I didn't know what more to do than to yell my head off. And I remember there was a process to it. I remember it so vividly because it was really authentic for a while. And then it became less authentic. It became quieter. And I would quiet down for a bit, and then I would go, well, that's not doing anything. And I would reanimate the cry, make it bigger, try louder. And it would become less and less authentic, more and more of a false pretense. And finally I would give up. I just couldn't put on the show anymore. I couldn't cry anymore. Help was not arriving from outside. And something would take over. It was a kind of realization that all I had was me. In the deepest, endless, most extraordinary sense, that was it. And something would start to tell me it was all right. There was a kind of very quiet, very subterranean reaching out for my consciousness, if you will. And it would come and it would kind of envelop me and kind of take me in. And it would give me this sense of peace. And I would feel soothed. I would feel comforted. I would feel something in me taking care of me. And it was very beautiful. And it was kind of all I needed. It was always a lot of work to get there. And the thing I preferred was when the cry would bring somebody in from outside. When mother would show up, when my dad would show up, somebody would come in and they would do that for me. They would pick me up. They would hug me. They would hold me in their arms. They would put me on the changing table and take off that wet diaper, and they would powder me down and make me feel good and feel comfortable, and then they would hold me some more, and then they would take me and play with me, and they would feed me, and they would treat me really well, and I really liked that. I was really addicted to that because it was so much easier than going down into that dark, difficult space of no help and nobody showing up, and then having to rediscover. And it was always that. It was never like I could automatically go back to self-soothing. I had to dig, and go through the whole drama, and it was always angular and unpleasant and difficult to get to that place again where finally the voice of my own inner being heard me and said, "You're okay. You're okay." It was never quite the same as what I would get from Mom and Dad, and mostly I think Mom. It was never quite that absolute. That the deeper thing I would find in self-soothing was the word I just used, "You're okay. Don't fret, you're okay." What I really hungered for was the outer manifestation, the world embracing me and giving me safety. But in those moments where it didn't come, the inner soothing was available. And it was available for a very long time. And then something really powerful happened, and I don't know how to describe it, and I think it happens more for boys than girls, but I'm not 100% sure. I couldn't cry anymore. I lost the ability to cry. And it was, I thought, part of growing up, and I even think it was acknowledged by my parents and family and friends as a sign of adulthood, that you don't need to cry anymore, stop being a baby. It's the words I think that were used. Enough with that crying. And I remember feeling humiliated by crying. It was really too much for me to deal with. So I just stopped. And I cut that part of me off. And really what I cut off, without knowing it, was my access point to my self-healing. And it was a big loss. It was really a big loss. And I don't think I even began to appreciate what self-soothing is until I met Rudy, until I started to find a teacher. Because for me, I had become addicted to the world taking care of me. I had become addicted to outer form. I had done a lot of things to see that I was soothed in the world. And I had a wonderful mother, I mean a truly wonderful mother, who knew how to entertain me, how to keep me engaged, who affirmed my sense of well-being, who told me I was wonderful all the time. I mean, she was really wonderful, and she was also very real. She didn't overblow it on some level, but she did create dissonances that mothers do create. I mean, and I started putting on weight when I was 8, and I think she was embarrassed by the fact that she had a fat kid, you know, and she didn't want that, and so she would say, "Oh, you would look so wonderful if you would just lose some weight." Or all my friends tell me, "You could be so handsome if you were thinner." You probably can relate to this. And so I started having issues. I built up a lot of issues around all of that, and I wanted to be loved, but their love became conditional, as it does for all of us, in all of these different ways. And because I couldn't cry, I had nowhere to go. I had nowhere to go for soothing at all. And so I'll tell you where I went. Mostly food, because I was looking for whatever pleasures I could get. Masturbation, that was a good one. You know, I would look for whatever I could find to kind of make me feel like I was in touch with myself again. But every one of them were addictive on some level. They were all things that really were of the world, and that would provide temporary succor and satisfaction, but they would not be permanent. And you needed to go back and back and back and wanted more and more and more, you know, and that, of course, is problematic. And then when I started to meditate, in the beginning, my meditations were what I would describe, and I've mentioned this in the introductory class today, sleeping sitting up. you know, and it's a very cozy thing to do, but it's really the absolute indication of unconsciousness. You know, it's a wonderful self-lie you tell yourself that you're meditating, but you're not meditating. You're becoming unconscious, not conscious. And so what I loved about Rudy and the practice that he offered was this eyes open connectivity, because you had to be accountable, you had to be recognized, you couldn't escape it. You know, you really had to be there. You had to be present with the person, in most cases Rudy, looking directly into my psyche and into my soul. And I remember trying to find places to hide when he was looking at me. You know, if I could deaden this, I could look off, I could pretend to be there but not really be there. But his gaze was so penetrating and so allowing in a way, and so insightful, meaning seeing inside me. And he created pathways that I could not help but go down. And he started teaching me how to find myself, my heart, if you will. And I started going into my heart and realized so many things. But one of the things I realized is that I loved myself conditionally. I loved myself if other people loved me. I loved myself if I was thinner rather than heavier. I loved myself if I could get people's attention. If I got from them whatever it was I needed. Before I met Rudy, I always thought I would be an actor. I was never a very good actor, but I liked the idea of acting because you had this. And that was such an amazing affirmation that you were okay. But of course, it wasn't really you. The character that you played was maybe okay, or the fact that you had talent maybe was okay, but then you became dependent on being talented, and if people didn't applaud or didn't show up, then suddenly you weren't getting this and you were not okay. So Rudy taught me how to find a pathway into a place in my heart particularly where I started to feel like I liked myself. Like I liked myself independent of anybody else. Whether anybody else said I was worthy or not worthy, I felt, wow, it just feels good to be here. In a way, I identified it as to be me. It just feels good. And I would be able to deepen it. I would take breaths into my heart and hold it, and I would feel this thing go, and I would go, wow, what an amazing thing it is to have something embrace you from inside. And then I would remember when I was a little baby, I would have that. I didn't breathe to get it. I had to cry to get it, really. I had to really cry. And then it arrived. I had to ask, in a sense, through the crying, and it came. And then Rudy gave me this practice of asking, and it came. He told me to ask for help to surrender. And surrender is exactly what I did as a baby. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. I cried until I tried everything I knew how to try, and none of it worked. And then when I stopped, there it was. It was waiting for me. I was soothed by this space within that just arose within and just did that. And then in my meditation, it was pretty regular. It was not a constant. The early days of meditation, some days I could get soothed, some days I couldn't. Some days it worked, some days it didn't. When it didn't work, I would go a little crazy. What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? And I would start to do this thing that was the equivalent of crying. Why not now? Why won't you give me this? It was kind of an external thing, but I was looking for something, the universe, to love me. And so I started to do, without crying actually, the equivalent of crying, of deeply asking, saying, please, help me, please. And it had an element of crying, but it was mature. It was just an adult version of that. And it just said, please help me. I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. And it worked. I kept doing it, and then it would just go, okay. here you are. And I would go, and part of me would want to analyze how I just did that and what I did, but then I said, that's not worth it. Just take it. Just take it. And I did. And I went, thank you. I just said, thank you. And gratitude started to become a real part of my inner language, because I realized this thing within, as endlessly and infinitely available as it should be and is, was not endlessly and infinitely available to my mind and to my personality. That I had to work it. I really had to work it to be able to repeatedly go there and get this to work. And it took years. It just took years of sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting through good times and bad times and sweet times and sour times. And I would just sit there and keep trying, and I learned how to do it. I learned how to go into my heart and accept it. And I also learned that there are days I can't get there, but it doesn't matter, because I truly, deeply trust it. Because it's been so present, so pervasive for most of my meditative life, that I absolutely know there are times where, for whatever reason, atmospheric pressure, internal demand, a kind of unexpected deadness, it doesn't show up. And so on those days it's really interesting, because I live in the absence of that enfoldment, and of that embrace. But the absence of the embrace, and I've talked about this before, is as much a reflection of the embrace as having it, because not having it, it makes you almost more aware of it. It's like, I think of it often as atheists are often more aware of God than religious people, because they're constantly in denial of God or in disbelief. Agnostics, the not knowing of God, for those who are actively not knowing, is a way acknowledgement in a certain sense. So it's really powerful when you are in process of living with this soothing quality, this thing inside you that is really deeply available to anyone who enters a meditative practice. That's really what you're finding. You are rediscovering and recovering this capacity inside to be taken in and enfolded in a kind of deep love and embrace. And it's available to everybody. It's not, you don't have to pay for it. Some people will charge you, but you don't have to pay for it. You can just be there and go inside and ask. And if you have to cry, and if you can find that ability, then great. It doesn't matter what tools you use. The tool is to go inside and basically ask, reach for, surrender. Letting go and trusting. Because the universe, in its external form, will not always come to you in your terms. Mama will not always be there. Milk will not always arrive. Food will not always come. Everything you're looking for outside has its own agenda, and you're only part of it. The universe does not deliver everything you want, and most of us learn that early on, some Christmas morning where the thing we wanted most didn't show up, or in school and the girl you like most will never talk to you, or whatever the thing is. Something's not showing up, and life is not delivering in the way you hoped it would. And many people get really betrayed and really angry and really hostile and do horrible things and act out just like kids. But if you're lucky, you find out you can survive all that, and you can actually find a way in back to that place that you knew when you were 8 months old, and you can go back in and you can ask, cry for, reach for this comfort, this soothing. It's really always available. You just have to know that you still have the capacity and the power to get it. And that's a really powerful and essential aspect of meditation. It's really the thing that most of us need and that gets you through life. It really gets you through. And I suspect many people on their deathbed, at the end of their life, reach this place they last saw when they were 8 months old, where they are crying out and saying, I can't do this. Help me. God help me. And it comes. For many people, I suspect, who are really finally able to do it, at that very moment, this comfort comes. And my only regret would be, and I don't know that that's true for everybody at that moment, but my only regret would be, you could have had this the whole time. You could have had this all your life. Why just at the final moment of your life? Why, when you're leaving the world, do you finally get the thing you could have always had that would have relieved so much of the suffering and so much of the disappointment and the sadness and the betrayal of life? So having a practice, basically, of meditating is like returning to the crib in your life, and finding out how, through all of your failing efforts to get the attention of the world, you can have the attention of yourself, your deepest self. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because I had an email this week from someone who I love very much, saying that my talks recently on the idea of nothingness were disturbing. And disturbing because this person did not want to imagine that life ended in the darkness of nothingness. And it hadn't dawned on me really that people would be ascribing detail to nothingness. And the detail of darkness is a detail. Nothingness does not include anything. So darkness is not part of it. Nor is light, nor is love, nor is anything part of it. It's the absence of all of this, of everything. But for the mind, there's something, I think, that's very dark about that in itself. It's frightening. And what I want to do for one moment is just give nothingness a name that might make it a little different for you. So I'm going to call it God. And you can kind of leave it at that. What I mean by God, and everybody has a different meaning and a different version and a different concept, but what I mean by God is the unknowable. The unknown, unknowable. In the absolute sense of that. In other words, not God the Father, not God that which loves you, not God that has any quality at all. It is, if you will, the nothing from which this comes, this meaning everything, including you and your body and your mind and your whole being. Out of that nothingness, this emerges. So clearly that nothing is not nothing exactly, but it really, to the human mind, nothingness means you take absolutely nothing into that space. Not a memory, not a thought, not a concept, not a trust, not a belief system. And again, all that seems very scary, to lose it all. But let me go a little bit into meditation. Meditation is, another word for it is letting go. Of what? Well, in the end, it's kind of everything. But you do it in the same way that you lose a tooth when you're 6 years old. It's finally hanging by 4 threads. It's just hanging there, and you're going all the time, playing with that tooth, hoping maybe you'll get it to go out, but you know it's going to hurt a little bit. You know, and then it goes to 3 threads. And now it's just dangling, and it's just crazy in your mouth. It's kind of moving around all the time. And so finally your mother says, I can pull it out. Or you can pull it out, but usually it's scary to pull it out. But letting go is getting down to 3 threads. And it's just there. And meditation is a process, thread by thread by thread, letting go, letting go, letting go. So that when the time comes and your mother comes, or you get the courage yourself and you go, and it's done. You all know that those 3 threads, as much as you may dread getting it pulled that way, it's not such a big deal. It's gone. Different if I were to take a pliers and take out one of your teeth. I don't mean to scare you, but that kind of letting go is really, really painful. It really hurts. And the problem with that is nobody wants that. And yet, at the end, the final letting go is either 3 threads or 1 thread, or it's the whole tooth. And it's the meditation practice of letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. That's so remarkable. Because it really loosens your attachment to and your addictions to the world. And you start to live lighter. You start to live freer. The stuff that dominated your life starts to not dominate it. You start to be able to be, in a way, more joyous in your experience of being alive, which is wonderful, you know. And a lot of people think of meditation as wasting time, but in fact, it's discovering time. It's discovering what time is, the preciousness of time, the preciousness of being. Because when you meditate, you're here in it. When you're not meditating, you're lost in this, you know, in what will be, could be, should be, might have been, what should have been, regrets, hopes, ambitions, all that stuff, which keeps you from being here. Meditation takes you right back to this and this. So this discovery, this is so extraordinary and so wonderful that it becomes worth doing, and it gets you through life. But as I'm saying, toward the end, you begin to be very clear that everything is going, everything is leaving you. And it's like mom not coming. Like mom will never come into the crib. You will be lost in that crib. And when everything goes, that means the universe does not come for you. And that's very scary. It's very scary to everybody. But let me propose something, because I think it's really important. That it's possible that the last moment of your life is the most joyous imaginable. That the last moment of your life is like what happens when you stop crying in the crib. It's when suddenly that deep quiet, that profound, and we'll call it nothingness, comes for you, takes everything away and gives you peace, gives you soothing, gives you yourself. That's the final embrace of life. We call it death, but it's the thing you've been waiting for the whole time. It's bigger than what happens in the crib, but it's the equivalent of that. It's like fall to your knees gratitude. It is so beautiful. It is so filled with kindness. It is so filled with gratitude, with joy, with acceptance, with appreciation, with everything you could possibly ever want. It's right there. And when you finally let go of the last thread of your being, that's what embraces you and carries you into nothing. I want to share that because it's my sense of things. And You may struggle to get there. Even on your deathbed, you may struggle to get there. Even after your death, I would say in a Buddhistic sense, in the Bardo sense, you may go on a journey trying to get there. But in the end, the there that you are looking for will take you. I don't know when that end is. I can't predict it for each person. But I will know, if you have been working this, if you've been practicing, if you have been living a life of opening to what is, of letting go, of surrender, of awareness, of appreciation, of kindness, of gentility, of love, of giving, of forgiveness, on and on and on. If you have been doing that, there's very little left for you to give over to the universe. It will just come, I believe, and whisper, thank you. You're done. I'm going to propose that as an idea. I would rather you think that to the journey into nothingness than blackout, darkness, futility, which I think was how this message I've been conveying was being read. It's not, I don't think it's that way at all. I think it's absolute completion. It's absolute wholeness. It's absolute total arrival at yourself. So, it's a good note to leave on. Any questions?
What comes to mind for me in the picture that you've painted or the description that you've used is what about an accident, like the 155 people that crash into a mountain? You don't know it's coming. This is all assuming you're lying on a deathbed and you're dying from natural causes or whatever, cancer or something, where you have time, where this is instantaneous.
Well, I can only reference my LSD trip of the 1960s. But it was very instructive in all of that. And that is, it's very interesting. You know, in the movie Ghost, let me throw that out for a moment, Patrick Swayze is like that. He's killed, but he doesn't even know it. He's still there. And then he goes, kind of, now what? And it's a slow, gradual realization that he's dead, that he still has a sense of self, and that there's something to be done here. There's kind of a journey yet ahead, and that life hasn't stopped. Everything is different. He goes through a real depression until he learns to, in a way, take charge of this state of being and do what it wants to do, which is to complete something, which in the movie version, of course, is save his girlfriend and everything. But in a deeper sense, that final moment isn't final, and we're all on some kind of journey, basically still to this. It's just, how do you get to that? Well, he is a ghost because he doesn't accept that. He doesn't accept his death. He doesn't accept what happens. Tibetans say, when that moment of death occurs, there is a clear light of reality. And that clear light of reality, another term for that would be this. If you can go yes, yes, or ah, at that moment, you will be embraced by the clear light, and you will be done, in a way. Supposedly, in Tibetan teaching, there's so many different versions of all of this, but the Tibetan teaching is, for many people, that clear light lasts that long. And then they're on the Bardo journey. Some of those Bardo journeys are heavenish, heaven-like and beautiful. Some are hellish, depending upon your nature, your belief system, what you know, what you don't know, all of these different things you may have to go through. Some of them lead to, quote, a womb that will give you another birth and another life, and you'll come back and continue journeying through this incredible vastness of manifestation. Others will go into a place of finally learning their lesson and going yes to the clear light, which in fact probably is embracing us at every moment. When I meditate, I just see light. And I don't know how clear it is, but I could call it the clear light. Giving yourself over to that, because it's really desirable light. It's something I think can happen to anybody at any point in time. But the actual truth of what happens to those people on the airplane is probably uniquely charged for each person. You know, the innocence of a child, the mother's attachment to the child, because there were babies on that plane, the person whose life isn't finished, who didn't say I love you to his wife. I mean, all of these things that are all swirling around, all I think become part of the story that then starts to unfold in a rather remarkable way. And on my LSD trip, it was a very long process of, I call it digital, but it starts to break up and it starts to unravel, and you start to go on this incredibly big, timeless, because there's no time left, it's all over, journey back to something which I, on the LSD trip, called mothership. Now I would call it self. But you're going back, and it's dismantling you, because that's what it does. And if you haven't ever done any of the process of letting go, it's not totally comfortable. If you have learned to let go, you just sit there, and it does its thing. If you're grasping, then it's horrible for people, you know. I mean, in Jacob's Ladder, I had the line that comes from Meister Eckhart, one of the great mystical theologians of the 1600s, who said, if you're afraid of dying, it's demons tearing you from your flesh. If you're open to dying, it's angels freeing you from the earth. Same creatures, same event. And it's all totally dependent on your belief system in a way. But that's what you deal with, you know. And, you know, whether you're a child, an infant, a mother, whatever it is, there's a lot of forces at work. That's why meditation is so hard and essential, because you have to let go of your children. You have to let go of your parents. You have to let go of your ambitions. You have to let go of your failures. You have to let go of your hopes. All of that. And everyone knows how hard that is. There's no easy version of this. Meditation is really called it a life's work. Why? Because it takes a lifetime to figure this all out. To really let go of a career, you know? I mean, for me, luckily I had enough time that my career played itself out. I got what I wanted from it. I learned my lessons. I had a wonderful ride. I got the rewards of it in a sense, and I was done. And I'm truly done. I mean, I don't need to go back to it at all. That's an amazing thing, to be done with that. My children are grown, so I get to be able to, I love them to pieces, but, you know, letting them go, I've already done it. They're already on their own. They're already flourishing. My attachment now, as you know, is my grandchildren, and that's going to have to get worked through. I believe I can do it. I really believe I can go like that. But I love them to death, you know, and will. It's been a life of learning. It's learning and learning and learning. The hard one to let go of, actually it wasn't hard, in fact it was surprisingly easy, was to let go of Bruce. You know, when they finally blew out the candle on Bruce, it was like, wow, that feels better. You know, I was so happy not to have Bruce. You know, I had no idea that it would be such a relief not to have to deal with Bruce. But then everything else was left. This whole universe, which is you guys, who I don't feel separate from. The whole of this is still here, and I feel now I'm living this, whatever this is. And I honestly tell you, and I've said it thousands of times, it's a complete mystery to me. It's a complete mystery. I just know it's not as solid as it looks. I know that it has molecular aspect, or cellular aspect, or light aspect, or dreamlike aspect. Whatever it is, it's not exactly what it appears to be. And I know when I sit in meditation, it dissolves. And when I'm done meditating, or I wake up in the morning, it's very solid. But I don't take it as solid anymore. I just take it as what is. And I live moment to moment, knowing that at any moment, could go. If I was sitting on that airplane, and that pilot was yelling at the guy to let him into the cockpit, and I heard all that, and I heard everyone screaming around me and crying, I would hold on to Blanche's hand if Blanche was there, or my kids, or whatever, and I would just go like, I think. I might start screaming, but that's not my nature at this point. But maybe, I mean, I can't predict what I would do, like, oh, or tense up, you know, or get frightened, you know. And if I got frightened, I've said this now 100 times, but I would look to the Christ model, you know, and here's what I would guess is the most enlightened being ever on the planet, I guess, and he got frightened. In Gethsemane, he got frightened. If Christ can be frightened of his impending death, then I can get frightened of my impending death. I'll tell you why, because the body is biological, and it has built-in terror of dissolution and pain, built in. So why not? So by accepting that, by accepting the what isness, I mean, if I could sit there and go, holding hands with people I loved, even the person next to me who I never met, probably, holding hands. I mean, I don't know if I could tell everybody, meditate, cool down. This isn't, you know, you want to do this with your eyes open. You know?
You thought you were on a ride, now you are.
Right. You know, you can't exactly, you do that, but you do it for yourself, and you just do this thing and go, thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done. I'm scared to death, but thy will be done. And then it's over. And for many people, it's screaming and yelling and terror and trying to, at that moment, do the ride that I think people who meditate have been doing their whole life. What is this? How did I get here? Why is this? What is this love? What is my fear? What am I holding on to? What do I regret? What didn't happen? All that stuff that's probably surging through the human mind at that moment, 8 minutes of trying to figure out what this was or is, that's not enough time. You can't do it in that time, which is why I think you'll get a lot more time to process it after the fact. But at that point, you can't act on it. You can just, you go through it. So.
Well, I was thinking about the scream, because I remember being on rides at amusement parks, and the sensation was so intense. The thing that actually lessened the intensity was the scream. Like, the scream made me feel better than not screaming.
Well, it's a kind of breathing.
Yeah.
It's a kind of breathing. You need to do that.
Yeah.
And that's not unlike double breath, only it's a lot faster and a lot more powerful. But yet, that's all part of it. So we do what we have to do. The biology of it is in us, you know. Crying for your mother is exactly the same thing. Screaming and crying for your mother is the same thing. And when that moment comes, you know, for all I know, it's so fast, there's no way to process pain. It's just gone. And maybe, what I said earlier, it's like, welcome home. For everybody. And my feeling is, because I've had this experience now a number of times, and it's beyond understanding. It's so beautiful. It's so absolute. It's so complete. It so explains everything. That whether you're a baby, whether you're a mother, whether you're a 90-year-old person on that plane, this moment that happens can be so complete that you just go, oh, finished. It's all explained on a certain level. It's not here, but it's like, of course, of course. And the great mystics would tell you there's no you to die. There is no you. There's just this idea of you, and boom, that's gone. You're no longer the drop in the ocean, you're the ocean. And you know it. So, you know, so many people, the whole spiritual journey is about dying and fear of dying. And I have a feeling we may all be very lucky. You know, Walt Whitman said, death is other than what you think and luckier. It's a great idea. And it may well be true. On the other hand, if you've lived an irresolute, bad life, doing bad things to people, causing tension, you know, if you've done a lot of that, I don't think you get out scot-free. I think you got to deal with that.
That co-pilot.
The co-pilot. I would not want to be the co-pilot.
You know, you're bringing up a million things in my head, but what
don't let them go in your head.
In near-death experiences, when people taste death and come back, and everyone has a different way of living that out after, and I suppose when you die for good, do you propose that is a totally different experience? Okay.
Who knows?
But, you know, I'm someone who, I look forward to death so I can understand everything and the suffering and everything. But when there's been a lot of suicides in my life, including children. And when people, Rudy said, don't choose pain, but if it's given to you, use it as nourishment and live. And what I've heard people say before they took their own lives was, I know death is beautiful, and I'll understand everything, and I'll see it all. So I want it now. So talking about, death and life are both sides of a coin, but you got to focus on life and finding the joy and dealing with the pain. And
well, that's my sense of it. It's the religious, spiritual teaching of it. I've known one suicide and had to identify the body, and the expression on his face was not joy. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget his expression. It's about as scary as it gets. So I don't recommend it as the choice, particularly. I think maybe at the end of life when there's no other choice and it's really painful and it's a way out, that may be. I'm not going to judge anybody because who knows. Right. But I don't know at the end that you get it in the way you're looking for it, like you finally get what it is. I think you do, but not you. The you that gets it will be gone. And that's going to be frustrating. You've got to be willing to not get it. Because the very idea of you getting it is the problem of your whole life. The idea that there's a you to get it is that the source of all suffering. Really. The idea that there's two is a problem. It's not a problem because we're meant to divide into separate individual selves during the manifesting stage of existence, which is this life in this world. But the Buddhist understanding, if you will, or the mystical understanding, is that idea of two is a false idea. It's a temporary idea. It's not complete. And the idea of it being fulfilled can't happen. What will be fulfilled will happen when you realize there is no separate self. That's the fulfillment that ultimately occurs, but it's not that you get it, because truly the you that gets it vanishes.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm rushing to it.
Yeah, no, well, but I'm telling you, you are expressing an enormous, as you say, there's a million things going on in my head.
Yeah.
There's a huge desire for your head to have this thing, and I'm going to frustrate that for you because you're not going to.
You can't frustrate it.
Oh.
Really. But I will say that when you say people should have a spiritual life, I will say all the aging adults in my life, and they don't have anything, religious, spiritual, anything, are having a hell of a time. And I just wish they had that to hold on to. And you can't tell people that though, and you're helpless, and it's that helplessness. Yeah. It's very sad. It's very sad.
It'll bring up compassion, but yes, sadness is at the core. The most difficult thing for me is, I'm watching now everybody living what I would call basically insane lives. People living with the idea that they're getting something, that there's something to be gotten, that there's purpose and meaning and value and all of this stuff happening in their daily lives, and knowing it's not true, and knowing it's filled with illusion and delusion, and it will all end up in disillusion, and I want to kind of say something to them, but there's nothing that I can say. But the people who know this are the ones living an existential life, whether they're doing it spiritually or not. If you're awake to life, if you're curious about life, if you watch and you know it has no permanence, it is ultimately continuing change and dissolution. If you know that, you live differently. The problem is living a life that you think has some kind of strange infinite permanence. which is what a lot of people do. Or you live a life knowing it's all going to be taken away from you, but you don't know what to do with that. You know, the frustration and the pain of that. So at least a religious life gives you something to hold on to, and that you can make it through the old age process, let's say. But mostly there's an incredible sense of misuse of life, of misguided lives, of people living caught in their illusions and delusions, and there's not much you can do. So you experience, and especially in awakening, a kind of incredible sadness about the world. Because there's not much you can do. But that sadness can also be called compassion. And everywhere you can look to reach out, to touch, to offer kindness. I'm watching Downton Abbey for the first time, and I've bought the whole series, and I just said, I can't watch all these dark shows, I can't watch the news. So I'm watching Downton Abbey, and last night, episode 6 or 7, was just about kindness. That's all it was. The whole episode was devoted to people doing kind things for each other. And I was so moved, constantly moved by just simple acts of kindness, and I realized how important that is in the structure of the universe. How beautiful that is, to be compassionate, understanding, allowing other people their moment. You know, wow. I mean, I don't know what God is exactly, other than I felt it in those moments of kindness. I just felt that's what this is. It's what it's for. Not to walk away with a medal, to walk away with the kindness that makes that possible. It's really such an amazing feeling. So that's what I think. I mean, again, no understanding, yep, but intimations of possibilities.
Well, a lot of philosophers say it all boils down to being kind. But sometimes kind doesn't look like kindness. You have to call someone on the carpet for something.
Absolutely.
That is a kindness.
Right, and we could go into long discussions about all of that. I think the great lesson of being awake in the world, of watching life unfold, of trying to meet what is at any given moment, is the great instructor. You just learn and you learn and you learn, and that doesn't stop after you disappear. Because whatever this is learning. Whatever this is understanding itself, or at least being itself. And that's an incredible thing, because you're being it as well. You are at the source of it. All of us are, really. It's just either aware of it or not, and to not be aware of it causes complications, and to be aware of it is instructive. Okay? Thank you, guys. We'll be back April something. 12th class will be April 12th. And as I've said, I regret this in a way, but that's the only class in April. And but it gives you free Sundays, brunches, you know, hikes in the beautiful, beautiful outdoors here, and enjoy it. Really enjoy it. And then May is an unknowable, but so actually everything's an unknowable. So so we'll see you when we do. Okay. But thanks for showing up today. Of course, it means everything to me. Thank you.